Hello there, this is David broadcasting live here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon on the Reformed Apologist channel here. And I just wanted to revisit the ideas from my previous video and live broadcast, the problem of evil in specific instances. And the point I wanted to make was really clear, but I had some glitches that were just technical in kind of the beginning and going through it. And I think I was probably wrongfully judged by people for that even. It wasn't me causing that, it was just the equipment or the connection with the internet. So first of all, if anyone has advice on how to make things so that those glitches don't happen, that would be great. But the main point is to just revisit the ideas I wanted to say, because it's not that complicated. And what I wanted to say was that people shouldn't be judging others for what happens to those others. And that's basically it. That's biblically founded. You're not to be judging other believers or other people for what happened to them, as if everything is a consequence for people's specific sin. That's not the case. From the scriptures, we learn that it's just more complicated than that. I gave several biblical examples, okay? And it's all over the sayings of Jesus to not be that way, to not be judging others so quickly. For example, John 7:24 says, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." And there's the famous verses, "Not judge lest you be judged," because the measure that you judge others with, you could be judged by yourself. So wouldn't it be better to not be that judgmental? I think if we're going to judge, and I was saying that when I talk here, I'm getting away from the scriptures a little bit. But when you judge, make sure you have all the facts straight. Well, how do you know you have all the facts? You may only have a portion of the facts. Okay, it is better probably typically to not judge. And since we don't know what's in God's hidden will, thereby that he would bring down judgment on someone, then don't judge that person for what happened to them until you're certain you have all the facts, or until you've spoken with that person to know their side of the story. There are typically two sides to every story. Do you know that? That there are two sides to every story? That's just common knowledge, worldly experience. The scriptures tell me in the teachings of Jesus, in the days of Noah, they were eating, drinking, and marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. Things were going on just as per normal. Everyone thought that everything was okay. They didn't realize that there was impending doom, that there was going to be a flood right there at that time. They thought that because they had it good, that there's no way that they were going to be under God's wrath for judgment, for sin. They thought that there was no way. They were judging by appearances. So Jesus told us in Matthew 24, verses 37, "For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark." You're not to be judging, end quote. You're not to be judging by appearances. You're not to be judging people for what happened to them. Let's say, for example, I know many examples of this. If I knew a brother who was arrested, okay, do you think I would judge him before I knew the facts of what happened? Do you think I would only take the facts from what others said about that person? Are you kidding with me? That's a golden situation to look at, because I myself would want to hear what other people say. Then I'd want to go to that person to see the difference in what that person was saying. Okay, I don't like to meddle in people's affairs that much. But that would be a golden situation to hear both sides of the story of, because you'd find out that perhaps things are not that simple in life. That there could be wrongful convictions is something that the framers of the US Constitution knew from knowing the scriptures. Okay? That's why they put provisions in the Constitution like writ of habeas corpus. So that if someone's held too long on something unlawfully, that there would be an escape clause or way out of that stupidity. That's why we have things like writ of habeas corpus in our legal system. So like I explained in the first video on this, wrongful convictions do happen. It's stupid to judge people for what happens to them as if you know from what happened to them what they did to deserve that. That's stupidity. The scriptures teach me that not everything that happens is just from that thing, which is God's anger at sin, etc., and God's wrath at sin. There are other things that go on, okay? The problem of evil, the problem of suffering has been debated by scholars. It's been talked about by C.S. Lewis. Generally, the problem of evil is summarized thusly, and this is how I guess C.S. Lewis put it. If God were good, he would make his creatures perfectly happy. And if he were almighty, he would be able to do what he wished. But the creatures are not happy, therefore God lacks either goodness or power or both, end quote. And that's how the unbeliever would pose the question or the problem, right? Well, God's perfectly just, perfectly good. So everything he does is for a good reason. That's basically it. What that reason is usually in his hidden will. Unless you are capable of knowing all the facts about something, that somebody committed a sin or wrongdoing, and then something happened to them. And I would even just pause, because I would be hesitant to judge others for what happened to them unless I knew all the facts of the matter, unless I had almost myself gone to heaven and spoken with the Father and asked him. Okay. Once I've gone to heaven and spoken with the Father and asked him about something like that, then I will know for sure that God brought down wrath upon someone for something. Until that time happens, most of that stuff is in God's hidden will. So don't judge others for what happens to them. Don't judge lest you'll be judged by the same measure. Forgiveness is in the scriptures. Forgiveness is in the scriptures too. I didn't want to spend a long time today talking about forgiveness. Just wanted to talk about the previous video and bring up some of the same ideas because I don't think it's settled. Among people, I mean. Biblically, it's settled. If you want to get back to the Bible with me, if you want to face the scriptures with me, then the discussion ends quickly. I knew all this stuff early on. I was taught by a good teacher. Before many things happened, I was taught by a good teacher. So that when things did happen to me, my construct wasn't that shaken. My worldview wasn't that shaken because I already had the basics down that all this is the case of the matter. For other people, that might not be true. They might have seen things happen where their construct is shaken now because they weren't taught properly. They weren't taught to know that. And I must complain that people's thinking is often binary code, where it's on or off, left or right, up or down, 0 or 1. Binary code is zeros and ones. There's gray areas that exist in things. Because we live in a fallen state of affairs and because we live in a world that takes discernment, if discernment wasn't needed, okay, what do you think? Well, discernment is needed. That means that there's something to see through. That means things are not always that obvious. So I will possibly just right now wrap it up unless there's something else here in the list. Oh yes, also in the previous video I talked about future judgment. Is not all settled currently. So if you are one of those people trying to judge others for what happens to them, you have to know that God hasn't settled all the score yet until the end. I referenced Isaiah chapter 35 as one of those examples where we know future judgment is coming. And by the way, from my studies of Isaiah 34, I know that God will judge the world's system. He will judge the social order, the social order. So you who think you've climbed up that far on the social ladder and you've conquered life and you've achieved and accomplished so much in the world system that you must be God's chosen ones, basically. Well, you know what? I know from Isaiah 34 that God will bring judgment upon that very system and lay it to ashes. Okay? For Isaiah 34:8 says that the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of recompense for the cause of Zion. Okay? And the commentators say that this whole chapter is past but future also. It's past prophecy fulfilled, and it's also future prophecy. That there's going to be an Armageddon, there's going to be a day of judgment brought down upon the world system. So why do you believe so strongly in that, some of you, the world system? Why do you think that it's such a great thing for you? I'll just pause right there. Have they promised you many great things? Do you feel fulfilled from what the leaders of the world system, worldly thinkers have taught you? Has it answered your questions properly? I'm getting a little cynical and sarcastic. Anyway, all of you have a great Sunday. Oh, yeah, I should read more from Isaiah 34 quickly. I didn't finish God's word there. The day of vengeance, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion. Verse 9, its streams will be turned to pitch, and its loose earth into brimstone, and its land will become burning pitch. It will not be quenched night or day. Its smoke will go up forever from generation to generation. It will be desolate. None will pass through it forever and ever. And then, end quote, God, through Isaiah, describes all the creatures that will come to possess the land, the unclean creatures, basically. So with that, I'll call it a day here. Everyone have a good Sunday. God bless you. Thank you to James from All for His Glory Alone for the positive remarks there in the comments. Appreciate that. Does not go unnoticed. So God bless. Have a good Sunday. Bye.